guys, Jay here. Welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 54. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where I talk about my painting, modeling, and wargaming experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 YouTube videos a week and you stream every single night. How? Could you have more to say? Well, I do. And here goes. This was the craziest week in wargaming of all time because it was Adepticon. That is a con here in the States, and we went to it, and it was super fun. It's only wargaming. It's amazingly only wargaming. A little bit of D&D sneaks in there, but it's like not board games, not really D&D, only tabletop war games. It was quite a crowd. And I went almost all, I didn't go on Wednesday. It was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I went on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it was a wild, wild ride. I got some games of Kill Team in, I got a little painting in. I mostly just walked around and looked at all the pretty things. I bought stuff. It was quite a time. But the first thing upon arriving at Adepticon, I had a class. We signed up for Adepticon a little bit late, not really even, and every single painting class was completely full, except for some reason the one at 8:30 in the morning. For some reason that one had plenty of slots available. So I took a class on painting chibis. And I painted this little Marvel Captain America chibi. It was a 2-hour class. There was like 15-20 minutes of presentation and explanation, and then we were painting. And I decided I was going to finish a model. I was going to paint as much of it as I possibly could in that short time span. And I think I pulled it off. Also, I'm totally awakened a new love of painting chibis. I think it's an interesting thing. I enjoy doing it, and I definitely think I'm gonna be doing a lot more of it. Taking a class at Adepticon was really fun. I actually brought all of my painting supplies, wet palette, brushes, water cup paints, because I had no idea what was gonna be provided. I didn't have to touch any of my own stuff. Everything was provided. I painted this guy up with Reaper paints and Scale 75 paints, which I do have experience with. I think for me, Reaper paints are a little watery for my liking. I think I like paints that are kind of gel-like. Games Workshop, Vallejo, Army Painter, I like a little bit of stickiness. I like a goo. I think I'm much more of a goo fan than a watery paint fan. But it painted up really, really nice, and it definitely awakened some chibis. I actually bought a few other chibis over the course of the con, but this guy I'm pretty darn happy with. I want to bring attention to this, I super highlighted his butt cheeks because I think that they're a little bit underrepresented in the sculpt, so I really wanted to bring a lot of emphasis to that area. And I actually, the teacher gave me a really, really good idea on how to do eyes, and this really applies more to larger scale figures and smaller scale figures, because on a miniature, if you can get a dot in there, you're lucky, but on eyes where you have a little bit of room to play with, he suggested to actually paint the eyes kind of like you would do an Eldar gemstone, with layers of highlight going from like a gradient from white to your deepest color, and then just put a little pupil of black and then a little dot of white. And that makes for a really, really nice looking, a little anime-y eye, which looks really, really good in this scale. But that is how my Adepticon started, by diligently painting at 8:30 in the morning, which I'm not necessarily not used to, but it was funny. And it was very funny that class didn't immediately fill up because nerds know, you know how nerds be. But yeah, that was super fun. Walking around all the booths in the vendor hall was a super fun experience because, I mean, I do that all the time by just going online and looking at this website and looking at that website, and then I'll like, oh, there's 78 pages of models that I can look at. Yeah, I'll go through every single one. But having all of it laid out in front of me was a wild, wild experience. And it wasn't just vendor hall, but there was a fair bit of gaming there, and I actually got in 3 games of Kill Team, and it was super, super great. I won 1, I lost 2, but they were all really, really close. One of them was a classic 3-way, and Kill Team, it does and it doesn't work with 3 players. I think the way it works really, really well is if you tailor the game a little bit. You have half of your models come in turn 1, and then you have the rest of your models come in at the top of turn 3, and that way the board isn't completely covered in models, because alternate activation gameplay, I find, doesn't work amazingly with tons and tons of models. I'm a huge X-Wing fan, and the very few times I've played thousands of games of X-Wing. I absolutely adore the game X-Wing, but the few times I've played like Apocalypse X-Wing with the big ships and just everything on the board, I think one time we actually got through a full game. A few more times we gave up because it takes so long, especially in a game like X-Wing where it's alternate activation based on pilot skill. And so I would move my Wedge Antilles, and then my buddy would move his Sunterfell, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm a 9, you're a 6, and then you have a 6. So who has the order of operation here? I move my 6 before you move your 6, and then you go. I think that's the one time alternate activation starts to fall apart is when you have tons of models. But in Kill Team, it actually works out really nice because if you start out with half of your team turn 1 and 2, by turn 3, most of your stuff's gonna be dead. So all of a sudden the models have been cleared off the board and then more models come on. It helps keep the game moving really, really well. But in my other 2 games, I played my Sister's Novitiates, and the Sister's Novitiates I think that they're tricky to play. I need a lot more experience with them, but the tricky thing about them is they can die so fast. There's a lot of ways to keep them safe, and there's a lot of ways to mitigate the opponent's damage dealt to them, but boy, they can evaporate off the board in record time if you're not careful. But they also have tons of abilities to help them score objectives, which is really, really nice, especially for a team that is very squishy. Because if you're hoping to keep bodies on objectives, I don't know if they're perfect at that, but they have lots of ways to mitigate how much mission actions cost, how much pickup actions cost, and they actually have a really, really sweet stratagem that actually can give models on objectives free actions, which is a really, really powerful ability that I wish I need to play some more games so I can learn how to properly pull off that function. But I love the Sister Novitiates. My only critique with them really is they take a lot of energy to play. I played one game with my sisters and it was a close game, back and forth, lots of fighting, lots of killing, lots of dying. And by the end of it, I was like, I'm kind of wiped out. I need to go to a compendium team. And I played my Orc Greenskins, and my orcs are super fun to play. They're tanky. They have great damage potential. They're just a really, really great team to play. And I was so close to winning. It was Orc Greenskins from the Compendium versus the Commando Boys from Octeris. And I got really lucky, and I had an amazing turn 3 where I basically wiped my opponent off the board. It was Nick. But I had thrown everything into killing him, and so all of a sudden, his last 3 guys were on objectives, and I couldn't kill them off the objectives, and I couldn't reach the objectives, so he just scored all the points and won. Even though I had way more models, I had taken an early game lead. I just could not physically win the game with how the game board was set up at the top of turn 4. It was kind of hilarious and awesome. I consider it a tie because actually I made a mistake with one of my secondary objectives, and so if I had remembered the secondary objective, we would have tied. So I consider it a tie, but I think if the court reporter played back the transcripts, technically I lost. But it was a super, super close game in the end, and it was really, really fun. And it was just fun to play at Adepticon. I think when I go back next year, I want to try to get in games every day. It's a little bit like they tell you at Disney to take a nap in like the day to recoup. I think at Adepticon you wanna do Adepticon, buy some things, take some classes, and then maybe just get some games in, and then finish with buying more stuff, talking to the vendors, playing some demo games. Speaking of demo games, one of the big things I really wanted to do at Adepticon was get in some demo games because I always want to try out more games, but it's so hard to do it. But Adepticon is really easy to do because you just walk up to the booth and they're like, you want a demo? And I'm like, hell yeah, I want a demo. And so I got to play some really, really fun games. I finally got a game of Infinity in. And Infinity is a game, it's a lot like Kill Team. It's alternate activation, skirmish level gameplay. And it plays exactly like XCOM. Like exactly like XCOM. You have two actions you can spend a turn. When you move in an enemy's line of sight, they get the opportunity to react and overwatch you, exactly like XCOM. There's grappling. It's exactly like the game, which is great because I really, really like XCOM 2. Caveat: And you guys can call me a big dummy in the comments because it's true. But I love the actual gameplay of XCOM. I love moving my guys, thinking about how I'm gonna spend my action points to complete the mission objective, taking out enemies, taking cover, throwing grenades. Love that aspect so much. I can't for the life of me figure out the base building. In XCOM 2, like, you've got that ship and you have to build rooms and you have to hire scientists and engineers, and I don't get any of that. There's the mini-map where you have to fly your little spaceship from settlement to settlement, and then there's that ticking clock, and I can't figure out where I should be going or what I should be doing. I have like 4 hours in the game, and I couldn't figure it out. But it's still a really, really fun game. I mean, I really had a good time with Infinity. A beautiful game board we got to play on. I really want to get a hold of some of that terrain. It was MDF terrain, but it looked amazing. It was super cool. And the models are, of course, dope. So I can't wait to get some more Infinity in. And then a demo game called Dead Zone by Mantic. And that game super surprised me. It's another skirmish game. It's alternate activation skirmish game, but that game was tight. It was so much fun. It's actually on a grid system, which I haven't really played games on a grid system, but I was really pleasantly surprised because it really sped up the game because movement all of a sudden wasn't even a thing. Like, you don't measure anything. You just, okay, I can move 2 spaces for one of my action points, and I can move 3 if I want to spend 2. So just boop, boop, boom, I moved. It took a seconds. And it's on a D8 system, and 8s are wild. So you actually don't modify your stats ever, you modify the number of dice rolled. And that also makes things really, really simple. And 8s are wild, so if I roll my 3 D8 attack dice and one of them is an 8, I just pick up another dice and I roll that and add it right to the pool. And the person demoing us from Mantic, he said that he once had 8 8s, where he just kept rolling 8s and he did like 25 damage. It was this crazy, unbelievable overkill moment. But that Dead Zone seems like a really, really tight skirmish game. Also, the way they handle cover was good. I love Kill Team, I think, but the most granular and difficult thing in Kill Team is the terrain. Light cover, obscuring cover, line of sight, cover lines. It gets pretty confusing. And even when you really are doing the game and you know what you're doing and you've played lots of games like I have, it's still like mental load. Keeping track of like, okay, he's on a vantage point, which means that my conceal order is an engage order, but I am behind obscuring terrain. And maybe if I can, so should I move to cover or should I stay behind the obscuring terrain? Am I within an inch of the obscuring terrain or am I further than 2 inches away from the obscuring terrain? It's a little bit more mental processing that's not necessarily leading to a more enjoyable experience. But in Dead Zone, it's a grid-based system, and if there's anything in the grid with you, you have cover. It doesn't matter if you're standing behind it, near it, on top of it. If you are in a square and there's a little box in the square, you have cover. It's just that's the only thing. It's so quick. I would love to play more games. Literally, like, we played a little demo game and they try to get you in and out because they want to let everybody get a chance. But I just kind of wanted to keep going and play more games of this. It was so much fun. Dead Zone was super cool. And the miniatures are really cool. And then the last game I demoed was Conquest: Last Argument of Kings. And this is a game I've been hearing a lot of rumblings about. I've seen the models out of my periphery, my local game stores carry it, and I never really looked into it, but I played a demo game of it, and it's a rank and flank, which is very interesting. I have no experience with rank and flank games. The only experience I have is everybody on the internet crying out about how Warhammer Fantasy Battles was the greatest game of all time because it was rank and flank. That's my only experience, but it was actually kind of cool. And what I think the rank and flank did really, really well actually is simplify movement. Because instead of, you measure like the front guy 6 inches and then you measure the back guy 6 inches and then you move all your models to fill in, you just move these clusters of models, and then when you charge, you kind of play Tetris. And you're like, I've got 3 guys on 3 movement trays and you have 2 guys on 2 movement trays. So our trays connect. It was a really nice little process. And of course, the other big thing about Conquest Last Argument of Kings is the models are gorgeous and plastic. I actually got a chance to talk to the guy who made the game, and he was tooting his own horn a little bit, but I totally get where he's coming from, because I was like, this is kind of crazy that this little game I didn't realize is like, you are like right there neck and neck with Games Workshop. Like, you have plastic models, you have multiple factions, you have a full-size game, you have a skirmish-size game, like you have tons of all of this stuff. And he's like, yeah, why bother even trying if we're just gonna have, if we're just gonna be a little resin company in our garage. And I'm like, yeah, that's fair point. But I actually got a chance to paint a Conquest model, and I think I might be a little bit hooked. This model, this is Jor-El from the Viking faction, and I had a lot of fun painting this. This was actually a speed paint. I painted this model in 2 hours, and I think a few things contributed to how it painted up so quick. I used this new painting method that I tried out in a video a few weeks back called Grimdark is Up to Us, and that I painted a little gremlin, and I zenithaled with orange, and then I just used many layers of quick washes by watering down paint and putting that over the colored zenithal. It worked so fast to get so much painting done really quickly, because I wasn't, base coat gray, and then highlight with a lighter gray, and then edge highlight with a lighter gray, and then wash with the black, and then more edge highlighting. All of those steps, all of those layering more paint on top of more paint takes a lot of time. But if you can do almost everything in a few steps, it works out really nice. And it also gets rid of true base coating, which is awesome, because my least favorite thing in the world is base coating. It just feels like such a waste of time, and it's obviously not, because you have to base coat. Like, imagine an ultramarine where you didn't base coat it blue, you just went to edge highlighting and painting the eyes red. It would look crazy. But with a technique like this, where it's already kind of interesting looking with an orange zenithal, and then I just water down green, and I put watery green all over the cape. And you can still see a little bit of that orange showing through, and it does some really interesting things to the color values of that green. And then I glaze on brown, and then I glaze on orange on the beard, and then I glaze on silver on the spear. It all kind of comes together really quickly, and then I can decide what things I want to bring attention to. Like on the trim of his cloak, I used yellow and white to really kind of make it look like it was gold glistening. And then on his beard, I did a super nerve-wracking thing. I painted it orange, but then it wasn't really doing enough for me. It's not drawing enough attention to his face. And so I put red ink in my airbrush, and I just ever so carefully just a little bit of red right where his beard meets his face and in the back of his hair. And I think it adds so much to it. Inks are wonderful because they're transparent, and so you can apply them on top of things and it won't cover, it'll just tint, it'll add to. And it's super added to this model. I think it's the best thing on the model. Although, what totally could have happened is my airbrush was a little cloggy, or I was a little quick on the draw and just red. And it would have completely ruined the whole model, and I would have almost had to start over. But it worked out. Conquest Last Argument of Kings, super fun game. I think it's definitely in the cards that I'm gonna keep at it and enjoy the game. It's finally maybe is happening that I'm getting into fantasy a little bit. I do play Age of Sigmar, but that barely counts. Age of Sigmar is basically a sci-fi game in a fantasy setting. But super fun. One of the biggest draws of Adepticon this year was Golden Demon, the Games Workshop painting competition. And I was super duper excited for a few reasons. I decided to enter actually, but also I decided it would be really cool to see really well painted models in person, because I've never actually seen well painted models in person in my life. I've never seen it. I've only seen it online, on Instagram, and things look different in photos and videos than they do in real life. And I always just wanted to know really what do they look like? And they look really good. Like they look better in a lot of cases than the pictures you see online. But it was super cool to see all of the stuff painted up in the display cases. You rock up with your model, you fill out a form. There's a bunch of different categories like single model 40K, single model Age of Sigmar, squad, vehicle, scale, duel, which is kind of a fun one where you have two people fighting in the diorama. But I entered single model 40K with this model, Cato Sicarius, who I actually painted live on stream, and I decided to enter this model, and I actually was a finalist in my category. And when you're a finalist, you get a pin. But that was super cool, because I mean, people typically paint for this competition, and I just entered a model I painted for fun, and I was a finalist. And that was super cool. I think next year I want to go back and I want to actually try. I want to paint models for the competition. I saw what did well this year, and it turns out what does well is perfection. It seems like, although the model that won for vehicles, it was actually super heavily weathered. So there definitely is something to doing like really interesting effects. But the model that won overall was a small lizardman skink that was painted truly perfectly. Every brush, there wasn't brush strokes. You couldn't see anything. Everything was perfectly blended. Everything was unbelievably amazing. And but I was a finalist with my silly little Kato that I just painted up for fun. So I think if I really try, I have a shot. I have a shot of taking home a golden demon. But also I'm very proud of this little Kato. He turned out really well. I definitely think if I had thought about it before the contest, I think I definitely could have fixed some of the non-metallic gold on these eagle heads. And the paint has started to scrape off of his lightning claws because I'm not that gentle with my models. But he's a finalist. Little Kato's a finalist. It was so much fun. But yeah, Adepticon was a really fun, wild ride. At the ceremony where they talk about all the winners, we had to wait in line forever, and then they finally let us into the room, and there was way too many people. And so luckily they could open up the room. It was in these convention halls, they can close off rooms and they can open them. And so they opened up the room. And so there was 60 chairs for people to sit in. And then the other 120 of us were just crowded around in the other side of the room. But it was super duper fun. And I have a pin, and I'm gonna put it on my apron and wear it with pride. I think I'm just gonna keep entering, and I hope one day I have a whole jar of these things. I think that would be so much fun. But it wasn't just about Adepticon and painting. Also, tons and tons of stuff came out this week in the miniature hobby sphere. And of course, Games Workshop had plenty to show off at Adepticon. So let's talk about the 3 things that are super badass and amazing, and the 1 thing that sucks. First up, the new Necromunda box, the Ash Wasters. We have a new Necromunda box, and Necromunda is a game that I've always had an interest in because the models are beautiful and the narrative style of gameplay is super interesting to me, because typically I play games that are a little bit more like you want to win and you want to set yourself up to win, whereas Necromunda, it seems a little bit more narrative focused, which actually seems really nice. I think that's a big draw for D&D too, whereas like you're just playing together as opposed to like battling, if that makes sense. But this box looks super dope. It comes with the new guys, the House Orlock, which are the normal folks, but who cares about that? The Ash Waste Nomads. These guys are super dope. We took a look at one of these guys last week because Games Workshop showed it off. And of course, in classic Games Workshop fashion, I think they showed off the least interesting looking of the Ash Wastelanders. I mean, they're all kind of the same, but I probably would have picked Sniper Rifle guy. But these models look dope. They look like they would paint up really well. Maybe with a little Army Painter speed paint. I think they would be absolutely phenomenal. The Orlock guys are cool too, I guess. They're fine. They're the normal folks. Their quad bikes are really cool looking. And I hope that there's a lot more vehicles. The Dustback Helamites, which are described as giant fleas. This might be one of my new favorite models Games Workshop has ever made. Giant fleas that just scutter across the landscape with a little Tusken Raider guy on top. It's just so great. The models are beautiful. You get a few of them in the box. Also, speaking of this box, the terrain it comes with is really cool. It's buildings up on stilts. It reminds me a lot of the Ewoks village from Return of the Jedi, but much more like punky techno, and it just looks so cool. They also came up with a really interesting way to do it where you've got your buildings and then you've got your kind of towers, and then you have these bridges that connect them, and it seems like the bridges actually have some wiggle room for elevation. A lot of the times with Games Workshop terrain, it's like, this is how it is. You build it like this. But it seems like this is much more set up where you can kind of arrange things however you want and have these bridges go up or down or lead to the ground. You can make ramps. And so I think this terrain is really, really neat. It'll be interesting to see. I wonder if you're going to have to do something where you really kind of litter the ground with lots of incidental and scattered terrain, because if all of the buildings are up on stilts, basically everything on the ground level is going to be able to see everything on the ground level. And speaking of that ground level, the board it comes with, the Ash Wasteland, is good looking. It's very nice, but I think the discerning player is probably going to make their own Ash Wasteland out of foam and sand, because the mat just looks very flat. It might look better in person, but it kind of does just look like a piece of cardboard that's been painted white. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of subtlety to the actual image they printed, but it just kind of looks like nothing. But overall, this looks like a super cool box. I've always been interested in Necromunda. I don't think anybody will play it with me, so I probably won't get this box, but it does look really, really cool. And the terrain is gorgeous. And the Flea Riders are just the best. But speaking of things that are awesome, Chaos Knights. Games Workshop hit us with some brand new giant stompy robot goodness with Chaos Knights. We got Chaos Armigers and we got Chaos Big Stompy Boys. And we actually got a tiny tease of these way back in the beginning of the year, Games Workshop teaser of what's coming out next. And these models are super, super sick. There were Chaos Knights before. There was the classic Chaos Knight that already exists and it was really, really cool, but that didn't come out until way later. Initially, you just had to take the regular Knight kits and chaosify it yourself. The one in the Games Workshop web store was pretty cool, but they just painted it different colors because Games Workshop doesn't really do kit bash and conversion on their official website because they can't. You don't get those things. You just get the base kit, and so. But this is a proper Chaos Knight with chaos weapons. It's got a big old Volkite weapon. It's got a weird tentacly whip arm, which honestly makes a little bit more sense because it looks like it could actually reach the ground, whereas all the other Knight weapons just kind of dangle 6 feet in the air. I mean, I guess they're for like taking out buildings and other big robots, but this Chaos one, it looks like he could probably just swipe away tons and tons of people. Like in Game of Thrones on the wall of ice, and they had that giant pendulum that they could unlock and swing down and sweep off all of the invaders. I imagine it a lot like that. And the Armiger is great too. It has a skull face, and I hope the box comes with a lot of different skull face options. This one that they show off in the preview looks really, really good, but I wouldn't mind a lot of different skulls. And it's not the hardest thing in the world to find skulls. But it looks really, really cool. I love his little dick tabard made of chain. I love that he has a chainsaw, but it also has a giant hook on the end, so he can hook you or he can chainsaw you. And all of the claws just look super, super nasty. And Games Workshop, of course, continuing their new tradition of adding little creatures sprinkled here and there. And the Chaos Knight has a bunch of vultures on it, which is actually kind of a brilliant idea because vultures look very evil. And it's kind of a fun idea that, you know, these mechs are so evil and bloodthirsty and they wreak so much havoc that vultures just follow them around because they know they're gonna get an easy meal. Super, super cool. It's almost too bad that it's taken this long to get Chaos Knights, because lots of people have Chaos Knight armies and have done tons of cool stuff with Chaos Knights, and now the kit for them has finally come out. And so it doesn't invalidate their work, but it would have been nice from the start to have the chaos half out alongside them, so that the classic loyalist players could have their pristine, beautiful knights with all the heraldry, and the Chaos people could already have their vultures all over their big stompy robots. But of course, I said 2 things awesome and 1 thing that sucks. And it's very rare. It's very rare for Games Workshop to put out a stinker, but I think they really, really put out a poopy model recently. And Games Workshop revealed this new Age of Sigmar fire, dragon, elemental, spirit, magical creation, and the artwork for it is beyond gorgeous. It's super amazing. It's like a fire tornado with giant bones coming out of it and a giant monstrous T-Rex face. And then there's the model. What in the Mortal Realms is that thing? It's a Kron Spine Incarnate of Gur. The Savage Apparition is a manifestation of pure amber magic, created in the wake of Alarielle's Rite of Life. It's a new type of unit that is part spell, part monster, and all danger. Wah, wah. It looks really bad. I mean, number one, the paint is really, really bad. It looks like orange juice. The fire that's meant to be connecting all of these bones together, it's painted exactly like orange juice. Like, go look at like an orange juice commercial where they're pouring the orange juice and that chasm of bright orange, super opaque liquid. It looks like that. It looks real bad. How on earth does that concept art exist? That amazing, beautiful dragon, and that it looks like that. I don't know. I think this is a huge swing and a miss. And what's weird is it's got the bones in it, but they're super, super light on the bones. I mean, you got some vertebrae, you got a couple, like literally a couple ribs. I don't know, make it have way too many bones shooting out of every direction. I mean, if you look at models like the Void Dragon, there's lightning bolts everywhere. They took care of every single inch of that model to make sure that it looked interesting from every part of it from all angles. This model doesn't look interesting from all angles. The head is fine. And that's about it. I don't know. I think this is a big pooper. And it's a dragon. How hard is it to do good dragons? Games Workshop does good dragons all the time. This model, I don't know. I don't think it's gonna have any particularly interesting board presence. I don't know if people are gonna be able to save this because there's just not enough there to paint. Maybe if people add in like cotton balls to create smoke and flame and green stuff the heck out of it, they can make it into something kind of interesting. But boy, I don't think it looks very strong at all. And another big thing when it comes to creating interesting looking character design is to make something look strong. Usually you want to make the head big, and then you also want to make the shoulders very big and strong. If you look at like robots, like Disney robots, usually have weak shoulders to no shoulders to make them look cute. And like, Star Wars Dark Troopers, they got shoulders out to here to make them look more imposing. And this model doesn't have shoulders. It's just a tube with two little arms sticking out of it. It looks like a salamander. Sorry, Games Workshop, it sucks. I wonder if that's gonna be a hot take or if everybody is gonna disagree with me in the comments. Probably both. But anyhow, the week wasn't even over yet because on stream I've been working on another kill team, my second Veteran Guardsman kill team because I built the Krieg Veteran Guardsman, but I finished off these Katachan, and these were actually really, really fun. I did a video on these a few weeks back, and they're just kind of fun to paint. In that video, I thought what was gonna happen was these models look like butt, and so I would try to fix them with painting, but I wouldn't be able to, and so I would just get to meme on Games Workshop a bunch. But I actually think they turned out all right. Obviously, if they were better looking sculpts, a little bit more modern proportions, they would look way, way better. But I think I was able to do something really interesting with these. And I have a fun combination of the Games Workshop plastic kit and some of their older metal kits. And so I think this is a very, very nice kill team. One of my favorites, and I can't wait to play it in game because Veteran Guardsmen are very, very strong. But I'm gonna get more games of kill team in. I'm going to continue to polish and admire my Golden Demon Finalist Mini and probably paint up some more Conquest Last Argument Kings. But that is what I worked on this week. It was a big honkin' week for hobbying, and if you enjoy the videos we make and you wanna see more, the best way to support us is over on Patreon. We have tons of grim dark terrain STLs that you can print and play with. We have episodes of Eons of Battle every week, one extra episode a week. We have live hobby hangouts where we all hop into a room together and just chit chat, which is my favorite thing we do because it's fun to just talk with you nerds while I'm painting and selling in for a nice weekend. And we also have merch. Really, really fun t-shirts and very comfy sweatshirts. Link in the description below. But that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.